Honourable Clayton Mitchell.
On behalf of New Zealand First to talk about enlarge the Department of Conservation. And over the rest break I spent quite a bit of my time actually going around to the rural and more provincial areas of New Zealand and seeing firsthand the neglect that the Department of Conservation is under. And it's not through the neglect of staff, it's a neglect of resource and support for their staff. I mean, we'll all remember back in 2013, we probably had the largest restructure of any public sector ever in the history of New Zealand, where over 100 Department of Conservation staff members lost their jobs, and we know that that was an absolute debacle. And restructure, I think, is centralised in Wellington. That's right. People in Wellington making the decisions for our rural and urban parts and provincial parts of this country, and not actually thinking about the impact that that's actually having on the rest of the country. And if you look at the word restructure, and I think if we use the word refocus and then change the letter O to a U, you might have the feeling of how some of those dock staff feel about it, and first-hand seeing what has happened specifically down in Stewart Island, where I've spent a bit of my time with the neglect that's taken place there. And I'll talk specifically around the way in which the permits for those shark cage diving operators have been put forward. I'll talk about the lack of time and effort that has been able to put into the actual cause and effect that shark cage diving is having on the residents of Stewart Island, and this is the sort of thing that's happening throughout our country, not to mention the neglect that's happening with our dock huts, which are in a serious state of repairs. And I'll just cast your eyes to the headline here: Dock retreats from controversial $12.5 million restructure. Now, 18 months after it's about to reinstate some roles and test new ways of working as a result of numerous flaws in the restructuring. And even just last year, DOC did its own extensive review last year, which concluded its staff lacked clarity about their roles. There seems to be a real issue in the Department of Conservation. It is underfunded, under-resourced and clearly understaffed. And it goes towards those poor decisions that are being made. They're under-resourced. They're not being able to focus their time on the things that really matter. And our provincial parts of this country are really feeling that under that. Now, if I could just give you some facts, the Department of Conservation manages all New Zealand conservation land and waters, comprising of about 1/3 of New Zealand's area, including national parks, marine reserves and marine mammal sanctuaries. We have about, at the moment, as of June of last year, about 1,950 odd staff. We have an expenditure of $344.8 million put aside for that as expenditure, with a surplus last year of $1.9 million. Now, I find that surprising that we've got a surplus of $1.9 million. And if you actually looked at some of the issues that we're faced with regards to DOC, and even looking at some of the issues around those huts that are unprovisioned and starting to show signs of neglect, then if we put 27 more staff members out there looking after our environment, looking after the animals, looking after the things that we need to be showing some serious signs of attention to, that would give us 27 more full-time employers working underneath DOC. That's just with a $1.9 million of surplus. I think that's also important to know. Some areas of work have been affected by staff shortages, including work with protected and threatened species, processing permits and concessions, and the management of those huts, which we've already touched on. The people of Stewart Island and the rural parts of New Zealand want to see more money put aside for the Department of Conservation, because we understand that to have a vibrant economy, we must have a vibrant ecological setup, and of course making sure that our conservation is met on a global scale. DOC operates pest control programs on 15% of the conservation land and aims to increase coverage to 50%. And when asked how this would be funded, they said that science and technology breakthrough should improve the effectiveness of pest control programs. Should improve. We absolutely must ensure that we get better outcomes for the money that we're spending, rather than it just being poured down the sink, or as we see quite often, the 1080 helicopters and planes that are dropping tens of tonnes of 1080 randomly across our preserved lands, our nature around the country. That's got to have some serious implications, particularly with the disappearance of our rock wrens and what goes on around that. I'd certainly like to see more funding put aside for the next budget.
The Honourable Nikki Wagner.